You're listening to the MER-Mates podcast, the marine science research podcast.
In this episode, we explore the fascinating career of a marine scientist, whose path has taken him from red tuna aquaculture to innovative toxicology research.
He will share his experiences in both academia and industry, and what it's like to switch between these two worlds.
From hands-on working with marine life to returning to the lab, his story offers a unique insight into the evolving field of marine science and the challenges of a career transition. Tune in for an intriguing conversation about science, passion, and personal growth.
Our guest today studied biology in the University of the Basque Country and obtained his PhD in lysosomal biomarkers in muscle digestive cells in 2014. He has worked in the private sector in different fields, such as the pharmaceutical field, fisheries and aquaculture. He joined PI in 2016 as a researcher, and he is responsible for the biospecimen bank, which we already talked about. His main research is focused in ecotoxicology and aquaculture. He is also a professor at the university in zoology and animal cell biology. Welcome and thank you for being here with us today, Xabier Lekube.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. In fact, because I didn't know that these kind of activities are related with the MER were occurring at the marine station, so it was a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, actually, neither did us. We're honestly we got lucky with this, to be honest. Yeah.
So a lot of Xabi is here today in the table. And to get into the mood of the interview, before joining the academia here at PA, as a researcher and professor, you worked in the industry. So we would like to know what sort of activities did you develop and where?
Well, yes, my story is a bit different to the rest of the staff related to research and teaching activities. Yeah. The thing is that I was a PhD student last century, and in the year 2000, I got like in a personal crisis, and I decided to give up my PhD studies. And years later, I went back, but this was an important point in my career because this way, I started working in the aquaculture world. I started knowing nothing, but I learned quite a lot of things in those years. And my tasks were a little bit related with everything because my first experience in aquaculture, when I gave out my thesis, was in Murcia, in the south east of Spain, and in the place where I was working in was related with tuna, red tuna fattening, and we have also sea bream and sea bass. So I had a Japanese boss, and to be honest, he had a very interesting way of watching things, and in his opinion, I had to learn everything about the business, from sewing nets to diving to knowing about numbers and even understanding the emails they were sending every day from Japan related to the prices of red tuna. So he thought that if I ever became a boss, I needed to know which is the cost, not only in terms of economy, but also in terms of human resources, about every task done in the long chain of the business. So I started. I learned how to sew in the nets and doing it also under the water, and yes, I learned everything. Working journeys were from very early 7 to sometimes 9 in the night or something like that, because we were working also with a Japanese timetable, and you have a lot of hours of difference. So yeah, it was an interesting part of my life.
So you go from like a PhD, which is also like, it's also a very sacrificed thing, doing a PhD, to getting a job in which is also very sacrificed, I guess.
Yes, and then you used to work from in many occasions the whole week, especially before Christmas, because in that business, the weeks before Christmas are weeks of great economic activity, and we were sending tuna every single day of the week. So, and then we got the best price of the first tuna sold in Japan in the 1st of January. So we got the best price of. I think that this news have been reported several times about how high can be the price of the first tuna in Japan in this fish market. And yeah, I experienced that as well.
And how much can it be, that price?
It's amazing. For example, I think that they paid like something like, maybe to the change in euros, it was like 600,000 euros per one tuna.
That's amazing.
But it's similar with what happens with the cheese here, where in Ordizia, with the first Iturrioz, if you turn the weight of the cheese and you play with the price, then you realize it's more or less the same as with the tuna. So shouldn't be that surprising for us.
Yeah. So it's quite an interesting career in the industry. We hope to get back to that later on. But we would like to know, why did you return to academia?
Well, that's
also another tricky question. Maybe.
No, it's a tricky question. Yes, after my work in the aquaculture world in Murcia, I decided to come back because of personal reasons. Especially if you want to have a family, so you cannot be far away. I came back to a turbot farm, but we got a pathology and it started killing all our fishes. So I was sacked from the job. So and then I turned to the pharmaceutical world, which is quite stressing. And 2010, I was sacked from the pharmaceutical world. And I end up so stressed and so fed up that I just think to myself, I need to do something intellectual. So at that period, we were in a quite big crisis. So I decided it was difficult to get the job at that moment. So I decided to, why don't I return to the thesis? So I was in connection with Xabier, which is a professor, and he had been my inner student when I was doing the PhD, and then he became my co-director of the thesis. So it's
an interesting.
So it's a very very weird story. And finally he told me, "Oh yes, you can do it. Of course you can do it." And at that time, PA was being rebuilt, so it was a difficult time. But finally, we opened, and in 2014, I finished my PhD and I presented here.
So now that you work here as a researcher and professor, also, how is it to combine both tasks?
Both things.
What are the main struggles, maybe?
The main struggles is that you have many different works to do. So it's a bit you have many different tasks, and I'm part-time. I must say that I'm part-time professor. So, but you have many things to do. Then you have to go up and down because the teaching is at the main campus, and you have many things to do, and finally it's difficult to combine because finally teaching has many. It's not just giving the lectures. It's you have also tutorships hours and different things to do. You have to learn. Well, you have to study a little bit. What are you going to do in advance? So it has several things to do. you have several things to do before you go teaching, and as combining is difficult.
I guess that comparing to the Japanese timetable in which you had to drive a Zodiac dive, and so it might be better, maybe.
Yeah, but I'm older right now. So
Okay.
I was 30 when that happened, and now I'm 54. So
Okay. We might be already in too much into the interview, but for maybe there's people who don't really understand the concept of aquaculture. So could you maybe briefly describe it for us?
yes, aquaculture is just reading any animal organism, aquatic organism that can be freshwater, can be marine water, and also plants of macroalgae or microalgae as well. So it's just culturing any organism in a aquatic environment. Basically, you can it's divided in different parts. You can you can have the husbandry, you can have the nursery, you can have the fattening, the fattening, the grow out of the organism. Especially talking with, I'm especially focusing on animals. You can do all these parts, or you can only do one single part. So sometimes in the case of fishes, crustaceans, or bivalves or whatever, you can get the seed or the fingerlings or whatever from one company, and then grow out themselves. Grow out all these animals by yourself in your facility. So depending on the business or in the company, you can do all these phases all together, or just a single one or two.
Quite interesting, because I think you usually only think about fish when you talk about aquaculture, for like maybe the popular opinion. So from your expertise, you've worked in the industry, and the current situation we have with fisheries and stocks being depleted. From your opinion, do you think that aquaculture is the future of our seafood? It's a tricky question.
No, yes. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, it is. Especially when you have to feed a huge amount of people, because the fact is that our world population is increasing, especially in the third world. So here in the first world, we are more or less going down because there are no birds. People is trying to move from some parts of the world to another part of the world, looking for a better life. But in just we can say that with two countries, we are like 80 different nations in the world, or countries in the world, and with only two, you have 2/3 of the population. China and India. India, I think, nowadays is the most populated one. So you have to feed all these people, and according to FAO, they have a lot of. They strongly believe that the aquaculture will help a lot to feed all these people. We have to take into account also that many of this population is surrounded by fresh water. So they are mainly focused on freshwater aquaculture.
Mm-hmm. And if aquaculture is the base of the seafood diet, in the future at least, what are some of the challenges that face the aquaculture nowadays?
Yeah,
in the following years.
Yes, the challenging is is the contamination. There are a lot of people. They produce several things, and finally, all these the residues of all these activities and the living of these persons finally end up in the water. And I know that they have had big problems with contamination. And the thing is that if you want to grow something, the first thing you need is clear water. So the quality of the water must be the best you can get in order to avoid pathologies and problems with the fish you are growing out. So I would say that's the big challenge in this, because we are talking about producing thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of fish or other organisms, crustaceans or whatever. And I think that in these places, the big challenge is the contamination.
So from some of your lectures and from speaking to you now, we're learning all about aquaculture. But if we go back to the first time we heard about it as a student, which was back in Reimer, in the question round, from people who have a scientific background, there was a lot of debate about sustainability of aquaculture.
Mm-hmm.
If you speak to people in the street, people might say, well, aquacultured fish don't taste the same. So it seems like there's a bad perception regarding aquaculture. Why do you think, do you think that this phenomena is true, that people have a bad perception of aquaculture? And if it is like this, why do you think it is?
Well, the taste is not the same. And in fact, you have different species and the taste is completely different. Okay, so it has nothing to do sea bass with sea bream or red pargy or stone sea bass. I mean, I'm consumer of both wild and aquaculture fish, and I must say that I consume quite a lot of aquaculture fish. And well, from the I know the business and I know what's behind. The thing is that, and I think I gave an interesting lecture in last November in Bilbao related with the World Aquaculture Day, and my lecture was about realities and false things about aquaculture. And it happens that, like any activity in this world, there has been an evolution in aquaculture. So things aren't the same as 40 years back, and people doesn't understand that. So aquaculture was very different 40 years ago, and there were some drawbacks at the time that has been completely solved nowadays, but still people is talking about things that were happening 40 years back. So I think that's one of the reasons why everybody is talking about the same about the same, because they heard it once and they have repeated it so many times that, for example, and people working in aquaculture, they know what's going on. And I think it's the first people who is interested in giving solutions to all these drawbacks, because finally you know that if you want to increase your activity, then you have a bottleneck and you have to solve this bottleneck. And for example, things related with the fish oil and fish meal, they have decreased a lot, but maybe also as part of the pressure from society. For example, you have to decrease and use oils which are not coming from marine sources, but then you need to use oils from land sources, and then you realize that the omega-3 is decreasing and is increasing the omega-6 in your meat. Okay. So this is something that shouldn't happen from the health point of view. It's more interesting to have higher omega-3 fatty acids than omega-6. But if you are using seed oil, which the source is not marine, then you have these changes on the diet you are giving to the fish, and finally you eat that fish. So these fatty acids are incorporated in your body. But the relationship is just the opposite you wanted to. So every time this is happening, you can change, but then the drawbacks, you give a solution to the drawback, but then you are creating another drawback, in this case from the health point of view, especially in these people who suffer from cardiac diseases and so on. Right? if you are a healthy person, then it's not that important. But for example, salmon has been almost prescribed in order to get certain portions of salmon per week, in order to increase the omega-3, in order to improve your cardiac health. But then, if these omega-3 are decreasing, then you have a problem. Yeah. So you have two ways. So you increase the number of portions per week, or you give a solution to this decrease in omega-3. So, okay. And nowadays, they are using plenty of sub-products coming from industry, or also from the fishing activity. So they take advantage of all this in order to create fish oil and fish meal without fishing anchoveta in Peru in order to produce fish meal. So they are giving a value to something that was from a waste. Okay, so and nobody talks about this. They are using plenty of fish meal. But can you notice that? Have you do you know the origin of this fish meal and fish oil? So maybe if people should have more accurate information, because sometimes we just pay attention to headline news of information sources that are not very accurate.
Yeah, reliable or not.
Very objective. No.
Yeah.
Definitely really interesting, and it gives a lot of debate, this topic, no? Now trying to link both aquaculture and the work here in PE, can you give us some examples about the research that is going nowadays?
We have here at PE, we have worked a lot with fishes, mussels, but from the toxicological point of view. Okay, so we started working in projects related with aquaculture quite recently. And I would say that it was mainly focused with mallets, because mallets have been very important for us from the toxicological point of view, because when we were doing biomonitoring activities, they were a nice sentinel species and so on. So they were very interesting for us. But now aquaculture has turned also into focusing on low trophic species. And we can say that although the great mallets are born carnivorous, they are omnivorous. So we can consider them as a low trophic species. So we saw the opportunity to ask for a project related with the production or the possible production of these fish species. And the first project was related. We make like a team with Geiker and also with the aquaculture school of Mutriku. And since it was 2018, probably we started working with them. And in fact, we have a PhD student who is doing his PhD related with this project. We have then asked different projects, and we have contacted other people from Spain who are also interested with the grey mullet. And it looks, Markel, our PhD student, has been recently in the National Aquaculture Congress in Las Palmas, and it looks like we are going to create like a working group or something like that of different researchers interested in the culturing of grey mullets in order to push up a little bit the research in these organisms.
Yeah, talking about Markel, because I had the chance to help him last year in the lab. I have understood that he's working on the Akura project. No?
Yeah.
Can you tell us something?
Well, Akura project is the project I was talking about. We started participating with Geiker and also the analytical chemistry research group of the university, who are part of P as well, with the School of Aquaculture from Mutriku. And okay, we started in 2018, and ever since we have asked like 3 or 4 projects related with this. And the idea was to research on a possible feed for these animals, taking into account that they are omnivorous. We were also focusing in using residues of food. In this case, we wanted to use the residues that are produced when you produce beer. Okay. Yes, because it's a very interesting residue. And it has protein, it has complex carbohydrates, and it was interesting for us because it has a lot of nutrients. And finally, it looks like the results when we made an experiment in the Spanish Oceanographic Institute in Santander, in collaboration with them, and it looks like we had to work a little bit more on this kind of residues in order to refine them and get better results. But research is long-term run, so we expect that in the future we will continue working on these feeds as well. And apart from the feed, we wanted just to how is the handle of the fish. We have seen that the mortality is very, very low. They are very, very strong. We knew it from the toxicological studies that these fishes are able to live in a very, very contaminated areas, and they are there. And then we had tested also different temperatures in order to focus which would be the best temperature in order to obtain the highest growth of the species. So we have done also the densities, because we are talking about animal well-being, but some fish species, they need to be all together packed. Yeah. If you just separate them, they don't grow very well, and they are not happy. So this animal well-being is also an interesting topic, but sometimes we have to be careful because sometimes you make them sad, especially if the density is very low. So, okay.
How do you know a fish is sad?
When you have fishes in a tank, this is something that the Japanese boss told me. You have to look them at the eyes. No, I see how they behave. Yeah. Just watching, if you stay just watching the fish for some time, every single day, then you know when it's happy and when it's not, and then you realize that something is happening.
Yeah, I guess so.
So they behave very differently, and when they are hungry, and so observing fish is not that stupid. It gives you a lot of information. So that's why it's important to just go and see the fish every single day. That, for example, with tuna, the first thing we used to do was just have a look at the nets and the big cages, and also if there was something strange with the fish. So because you immediately see it, and you know that something is happening.
And now another chance for debate and trying to open minds. When we talk about cultivating mullets for later consumption, might seem a bit odd for some of the audience, because usually in some places, or at least here in the Basque Country, mullets have a bad reputation, because you often find them in harbors, in polluted waters, and they can eat anything you throw them.
Yeah.
So what's your idea about cultivating mullets here, and how would you open the mind of the audience to start consuming them? Or
Well, I would say that consumers, and I would say also it's my opinion as a consumer, sometimes we are very stupid. I mean, in the sense that sometimes maybe it sounds a bit rude, but sometimes they sell us shit and we eat it. Okay? And when I say shit, it can be anything. Okay? So it's a matter of just Nowadays, there are many campaigns in order to strengthen the consumption of certain things. And with fish, it has been done several times. I can remember, I'm 54, and I still remember the ads in the television made by From, which is an organization related with the Ministry of, at the time of Fisheries and so on, in order to strengthen the consumption of certain species because they had bad reputation, or people thought that they were just. But it's for example, what happens with we appreciate a lot, talking about the Basque Country, we appreciate a lot the anglerfish, okay? And for us, anglerfish is one of the best fishes you can eat. But I've been in Norway several times, and in Norway they used to fish anglerfish, and as they saw that it was ugly, they were just throwing away. So they didn't consume it. They just throw it back to the water. So it's a cultural matter, and it can be a matter. It can be also a matter of the moment, of fashions and stuff like that. For example, you can apply it also to the Japanese food, all the sushi. Nobody talk about sushi at the beginning of the 90s. And then I remember going to MER-Mates in 2000. Sushi was. Well, everybody was talking about sushi and sushi restaurants. At the time, there were very few sushi restaurants in Spain. So my boss knew all of them, and they said, "They are sushi restaurants, but they are run by Chinese people. No Japanese people in front of the business." And now they are increased a lot, and people consume a lot of sushi. And I'm sure that at that time they say, "Just eat this raw fish." Are you crazy?
Yeah.
So I think that consumers follow fashions and stuff like that. It's the same with the mackerel. They have made plenty of campaigns, institutional campaigns, in order to extend the consumption, and finally it gave good results. And not only in Spain, also, for example, I have seen in Portugal that they have done the same in Portugal. For example, I remember being in Faro and going to a fish restaurant, and we were eating very small mackerel that is caught very easily there, and and somehow they changed the situation, and it was having a good price, and people were consuming a lot of mackerel at that time.
So now, before coming to an end, we've learned that you've worked in both industry and now research. Do you know any pros and cons of working in both places?
Yeah, both places are quite different. So, working in the industry is more, I would say, more stress, because you always have a stress on top. Especially, I was working very focused in sales. So when you are working in sales, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter if you are in the pharmaceutical world, or if you are selling machines or whatever. You have a huge pressure because you have to sell. You have to reach to certain objectives, and that was very stressful. And then if you don't have the proper bosses, that can be a nightmare. And I have suffered that. I just changed from having the best boss you can ever imagine, and suddenly he was sacked, and then there was another boss, and it was like a nightmare. So you have always this pressure, and sometimes especially when your boss is not living here but far away city or whatever, and doesn't know very well your area, they have this centralizing idea that everything is like in the big capitals. They are completely wrong, and this happened to me. And as I told you, have a plenty of pressure, and for me, working now, you can have some, let's say, some days where you have plenty of stress because there is a deadline or whatever, and you have to prepare everything. But it's just certain days, and I would say that otherwise the work is more relaxed in the way that you don't have a boss that is going to sack it. You don't reach to the. So that's it. I mean, but it has also it good parts as well. Yeah, you know, different people, and I have learned. I would say that working in the private sector it helped me, especially because I was quite shy at the moment, and you know, it helped me to develop in that way and to know plenty of people and to talk also in public and to have relationship with people that maybe you don't have nothing in common, but you have to stay with them. So it was nice in that sense, and I think that I learned a lot, and I developed my personality in that sense quite a lot.
Amazing. We're going to reach the last 2 questions we ask to every guest we have. So the open questions, you can answer whatever you want. What book or scientific paper would you like to recommend to our audience? Honestly, we don't read that often, so if you want to recommend some other format of entertainment or learning.
It has to be scientific, or it can be...
It doesn't have to be scientific at all, no.
Well, for example, I remember a book that I read and impressed me a lot during one of these campaigns where we were fishing red tuna. And sadly, as before, I bought a book in the Heathrow Airport when one of my last visits in London. It was about Shackleton, the explorer.
All right.
Okay, so I bought it and I put it in my shelf. And when I took it to Murcia, and when I was navigating in the Mediterranean, I decided to take the book with me, and I read it like this, and it was so interesting. And I think it was the moment of reading it, because I was sailing in a boat around the islands, and this was about this exploring in Antarctica and so on. And it was very interesting book, and yes, I would recommend it too, because it's amazing how all the penalties and the problems that these people suffer and nobody died. Yeah. So it was amazing. For me, it's the most amazing trip I have ever been told about. So I would recommend that book.
We'll make sure people.
What's the name of the book?
I can't remember. It was. I think it was the book that somebody from the crew of Shackleton wrote it. Yeah. I can't remember
We'll have a look for it.
I can't remember. Maybe I can. I have it at home, so I can tell it to you another day.
Another day, yeah. And since now you're in academia, and a lot of our public might think about, well, our audience might want to work as this in the future. Do you think, in your opinion, that the work as a researcher is well valued or appreciated in society? Or, well, it's an open question, so...
Well, I would say that in some places more than others, and they are better paid in some places than others. But I think that they are... the thing is that the pressure is becoming more and more, it's becoming higher and higher, especially pressure of publishing. So if you don't publish, you cannot reach anywhere. And I think that this pressure wasn't, when I was doing the PhD, wasn't that high. And I can say that I have had a research experience many years ago back. Then I worked in the private companies and then came back. And I think that this is a big change. Everything, all the information, of course, is different as well. You can get the information immediately in terms that you click on, and you have the paper, the PDF, and so on, and that's good. But sometimes we have so many information that you cannot digest it very well. But then so you get everything is a bit superficial. But then the pressure for publishing, for creating a CV, it's very high as well, and it wasn't that way at the end of the 20th century, I guess. So And yes, the pressure is in that sense very high, and I think it's we should. And then we have seen recently that many of the papers are just. I think that there was a guy who was publishing a paper a day or something like that, which is impossible. And I have also, yes, I'm in contact with some people from Panama, and the authorities were asking them just, in 1 month you have to write a paper. And I said, okay, you want that? You should go to Saudi Arabia or something like that, and see if you can do it there, because sometimes it's so stupid that it's not the quality, it's just how many papers, and finally, which is the quality of all these papers. And I'm also critical with myself. Sometimes I think that we should just stop and think a little bit about this. But
I've heard this topic in our own cohort. There's already pressure about publishing, and we've not even started.
Publishing is not that easy.
It's not easy, no.
No, it's not that easy. Maybe you get results that are not very interesting, and they say, okay, they are not interesting, and so it's not that easy. And they are asking more and more and more, and I think you say that's enough.
Yeah. Well, Xabier, it's been fantastic hearing about your insights of your job and of the aquaculture world. I think it's been a very interesting interview. So we've come to an end. So thank you very much for being here with us.
Okay, no, thank you to you for this opportunity. And it has been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure to be here. And okay, I think it's a nice activity inside the MER. Okay, go on and good luck.
Thank you very much.